All right, everybody, welcome back to another exciting, I hope, episode of All of the Avengers. I am your host, Van Allen Plexico from AvengersAssemble.net and White Rocket Entertainment. And we are currently up to Avengers 67 and 68, one of the great early Ultron stories. And I'm looking forward to talking about this one for a little bit. This is one I have not read in many years, and so it's fun to go back and see one of the early appearances of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Avengers villain of all. I know that folks who know the Avengers more from the movies might take issue with that because Age of Ultron was not the greatest. In fact, it was probably the least great of the Avengers movies. But I think that's fair to say in a lot of ways. But Ultron's great appearances over the years in the comics. I mean, the first Avengers comic I ever read, the first Marvel comic I ever read, was Avengers 162, The Bride of Ultron, with Jim Shooter and the great George Perez, of course, creating it, which I can't wait when we finally get to that. Before we get into these two issues, though, let me go ahead and remind you that you can find all of these episodes together on the White Rocket Entertainment, White Rocket TV channel on YouTube. You can also find them in the playlist on www.avengersassemble.net. And I'm excited to say, as I record this in October of 2024, that next year, 2025, is the 30th anniversary of AvengersAssemble.net. I love the fact that that my Avengers website existed before Marvel had a website, really, way back in 1995, and I created it while I was still in college, and we had so many people to visit in the early years, and it was such an active place, and it's not really an active website anymore, but it does host these videos. And so I think that's a plenty good reason to keep the website going for another 30 years, maybe, is so that we can continue to review these great issues of the Avengers. And I'm going to read all of the Avengers sooner or later, so bear with me. I also want to point out, because I haven't really pointed this out before, I edited and co-wrote 2 books on the Avengers that you may not know about, called Assembled and Assembled 2. If you go on Amazon, you can get them in Kindle form. You can get them in paperback. Assembled and Assembled 2. We were going to do an Assembled 3, but the steam kind of ran out on the project, and we never put the third one together. I even had an introduction written by Kurt Busiek that I don't believe ever got used. So one of these days, somebody besides me will read Kurt's introduction about the Avengers. But anyway, yeah, if you go to Amazon, you can still find those books called Assembled and Assembled 2 by me, the editor, Van Allen Plexico. Okay, let's get on. And again, I got to remind you also, because we got to keep the show going and we got to keep the website up. We have a Patreon page, and we really need more than a handful of folks there to keep the thing going. So if you'd be so kind as to visit patreon.com and look for all of the Avengers there, sign up, would really help. Thanks. Okay, let's get into Avengers 67 and Avengers 68, one of the early great Ultron sagas. And of course, here's this cover. And I mean, this is really a classic Avengers cover. And I'm looking at it. I think it must be Barry Windsor Smith. I'm pretty sure it's Barry Windsor Smith with a different inker. But it's a very effective cover. There's something about the coloring I don't love, but everything else about it is really good. I think if you could recolor this one and just not make it so dark. I don't know though. Maybe not. At least on my screen and in my copy, it looks very dark. On the YouTube, it may not look as dark. But anyway, it's a great cover. Look, you even got Iron Man, Thor, and the Vision, Hank and Jan, Clint. I mean, this is a really, and of course, up in the cover box, Black Panther, because he's going to show up in this story. This is a really classic Avengers lineup. I mean, it's hard to find fault. The only fault I can really find here is there's no Scarlet Witch. She's the only other. Well, of course, Captain America. But if Cap and Wanda were here, it would really be perfect. But this is a really good lineup. I think a really good lineup of Avengers. All right, so the issue is actually called not Die Avengers Die, but We Stand at Armageddon. And I think it's interesting that in addition to Roy Thomas as a writer, you have Barry Windsor Smith. He's just Barry Smith here, but Barry Windsor Smith and George Klein inking. And this is a very Jack Kirby looking splash page, isn't it? I mean, I know it's Barry Windsor Smith, but man, it looks like a 1960s Jack Kirby page. The only thing that we need is one of the police officers. Actually, what we need is this guy right here being down in the corner looking at us and pointing like, let's see if you can look at me in the little corner here, going like, because that's the classic Jack thing, is to have the one guy down in the corner of the panel going, pointing back, the other direction and screaming, yelling. So there's an explosion at the top of Avengers Mansion, and then we just get into a fight, but man, it's a great fight. So Ultron is now Ultron 6. This is the famous Ultron whose lower body is kind of like Korvac before Korvac became Michael the enemy, right? He was Korvac the machine man or whatever, and his lower torso was a flying machine. And so this is basically what Ultron is here. And I'm not going to go into all the details, honestly. I mean, it's a great early example of a fight between Ultron and the Avengers. This splash page is beautiful with Hank and Thor. Meanwhile, the Vision is filled with angst, realizing that he had been brainwashed, essentially, or I guess computer washed, by his creator Ultron to recreate Ultron. And that, of course, will be a trope that comes back over and over. Whenever Ultron's been gone for a while, somebody recreates him. In the I've got it down here somewhere, but in the Marvel novel, well, I didn't think ahead to prepare it, but somewhere around here I have the Marvel novel of short stories or novellas. And one of them is the Jim Shooter, This Evil Undying, where he has Tony Stark brainwashed to rebuild Ultron, which I thought was pretty cool. That was the first time Tony Stark was associated with Ultron. They would then use that in the movie rather than it being the Vision or Hank Pym. So a lot of different people have built themselves an Ultron over the years, and it's always evil Ultron. So the Vision's mad because he realizes he was used, he was controlled. Meanwhile, back at Avengers Mansion, the Avengers and Iron Man was damaged in the previous issues, his armor, so he's not able to go full steam against Ultron. Ultron is cleaning house, knocking the Avengers pillar to pillar, pillar to post. Hank tries to stop him, just gets run over for his trouble. And ultimately, Ultron escapes, which is something that he does later in the 162 issue. He likes to get away when things aren't going exactly the way he wanted them to. And so Clint, as Goliath, catches Hank as Yellow Jacket, who is falling from this clash. And Ultron, meanwhile, says the Avengers may count themselves fortunate for the moment, but they will want to live on when all of wretched humanity perishes. Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering where they was going with that. But will they want to live on when all of wretched humanity perishes about them? So Ultron is already talking like a mechanical Dr. Doom, and I'm here for it. I enjoy that. So the Avengers are standing around talking about what to do, and Hank is just fed up. He wants another crack at that metal madman. Jan says, no, we got to take it easy. Iron Man has to rest up. Let's think this through. And they start thinking about the Vision. Whatever happened to the Vision? He fought us to a standstill last issue, But then when Ultron showed up, he wandered off in a daze. What's up with that? And so Hank gets a little dizzy, and he's also testy. He says, I'll be as good as new when we get on Ultron's back and off each other's. Okay. So they get in the Quinjet and fly looking for Ultron. Meanwhile, the Vision realizes that he needs to track down Ultron and do something about him. And so he sees Ultron fly over, and he tracks Ultron, I think, back to Ultron's headquarters. Now, meanwhile, we find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. is tracking down Ultron because they want that adamantium that Ultron is now made out of that was stolen. And we actually get to see, that's got to be Gabe, right? There's Dum Dum Dugan, of course. And there's Val, who I guess is the character that Valentina, that Julia Louis-Dreyfus is playing now in the Thunderbolts movie. I think that's who that is. And they're talking about the Vision stole the adamantium from the helicarrier. And I believe that's so Dum Dum and Gabe, of course, end up being the two main protagonists, the human protagonists in the Godzilla comic that'll be coming along a few years later. And that's one of my all-time favorites. I love Marvel's short-lived Godzilla comic where Dum Dum Dugan and Gabe chase Godzilla around North America. It's a lot of fun. If you've never read that series, I believe it just came out. They just got the rights to reprint it in a nice color edition for once. And I've seen it, and it's gorgeous. So, yeah, pick up that Godzilla massive trade paperback or hardcover. It should have like 24 issues in it, I think, and it's so good. It's a really fun book. Meanwhile, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s talking about capturing Colonel Fury. And for details, see S.H.I.E.L.D. number 14 now on sale. I haven't read S.H.I.E.L.D. number 14. I don't own S.H.I.E.L.D. number 14. I have no idea what they're talking about. So this is an example of Marvel's greater universe continuity just going right over my head. But they're always up to something at S.H.I.E.L.D. You know, somebody's always going rogue or being brainwashed or something. So I'm sure it's something like that. All right, so Ultron needs more power. Vision sneaks in and tries to sneak up on him and attack him. Ultron is talking about how he's going to blow up the city in the radioactive rubble. Only Ultron will survive. The Avengers land on the roof as S.H.I.E.L.D. flies over. And the Avengers talk about warning S.H.I.E.L.D. off. But suddenly they realize there's a spiking of radiation coming from this building as Ultron is building up his weapon. And then the Vision steps out and confronts him. And they have words with each other, as you might expect. The roof collapses and the Avengers are falling. The Vision and Ultron fight. And Ultron is really able to get the better of the Vision, but the Vision gets in some good shots too. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agents come in. They've all got all kinds of weapons that are specially prepared for this kind of a situation. Ultron turns himself into energy somehow. Sheer ionic force, which even you may not adjust your molecules to withstand. Then he turns back into Ultron, leaving a nearly unconscious Vision lying on the floor. The Vision's trying to get up. Who could have dreamed that Ultron now possessed such infinite power? Yet I must not fall, must not falter. With each passing moment, the time draws nearer for the final Holocaust. And then the S.H.I.E.L.D. guys come in. I love, he says, in S.H.I.E.L.D. regalia. That's I like the use of regalia there, Viz. And they see him. They call him Avenger. You better believe it, Avenger. We don't know what your setup is down here, but we want that adamantium. We want it now. You got 3 seconds, Syntho. Then it's Blastville. Who are these S.H.I.E.L.D. agents? They're from like 1962. And the Vision's trying to reason with him, but they don't care. They're a bunch of idiots. They open fire on the Vision, knock him out with some kind of a vibro gun. Okay. I hear you can get those at Target now. And so a great battle had taken place here, Thor realizes. They hear the humming, and all of a sudden, the debris around them is disintegrating. And Hank says, "Can't you see the chain reaction has begun? Ultron 6 has but to pull one last switch to wipe a city off the face of the map. Next, the final gambit." All right, so that's part one. And again, there's a fun issue. Not a lot of deep thinking going on here. It's mainly just battle, and that's fine. I mean, it was a fun issue, setting up, and it's structured very much like those Stan Lee issues where they use one issue to set up the problem and the next issue to take them down, kind of like the classic structure of the Batman 66 TV show, where every other episode would either end with Batman and Robin captured in the death trap or with the villain defeated. So that's kind of the structure that Stan Lee used a lot, and that's what we see again here. There's one thing I want to point out, though, from after this issue. There's Sergeant Fury. It's funny that Nick Fury had two monthly, or I don't know, I guess monthly comics going on at the same time back then. He had his Nick Fury and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comic, and he had Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. So one thing I want to point out is, I guess this is probably Roy Thomas answering the emails in 1967 or whatever, answering the letters. But he says in a response to this first person, Jerome, as soon as Avengers number 63 came out, we were recipient of a ton of mail on our Hawkeye to Goliath to Yellow Jacket triple play. In other words, Hank Pym became Yellow Jacket, Clint became Goliath. There is no Hawkeye. As we anticipated, I think Roy says, it turned out to be one of the most controversial changes ever made in a Marvel mag, and the letters on these pages are a good random sampling of their contents. The score currently stands almost evenly divided, and that rather accurately represents the ratio of pro and con comments received thus far. So we think we'll keep things as they are for a while and see if we can't convert you to our way of thinking. All right. So fan reaction was pronounced to the change of Hawkeye to Goliath, but about 50-50 it sounds like. And then they say, next issue, how else can we say it? The ultimate Ultron. All right. So let's get into, without further ado, if the computer will work, Avengers 68. And it's being problematic on me. All right, here we go. Oops, wrong button. I always do this. All right, let's get that comic back up on the screen. There we go. Avengers 68. And, I got to be honest, I don't love this cover. And it suffers from, it's a beautiful piece of artwork. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful piece of artwork. But it's a great comic cover, even though they're all just kind of standing around over the apparently dead body of the Vision. What don't I like about it? It has the same problem in my mind that the cover of Avengers 177 had. That was, I believe, the last issue of the Korvac saga. And the problem I had with the last issue of the Korvac saga was it was the great big finale, grand slugfest battle issue, and yet the cover was Donald Blake, and you couldn't even tell that it was Donald Blake. It was just some blonde guy doing CPR on, I think, Iron Man or something. And it says, "These who lay dying," which would really be "These who lie dying," but okay. And I always had a problem with 177's cover because it's it needed to show a giant battle between the Avengers and Korvac, not just the aftermath, which is basically the last page. The whole cover is a spoiler too. And this was kind of the same way. This cover should be another great Ultron versus the Avengers battle. But instead, they're all standing around over the Vision. Now, this would be a good cover maybe for 69, where you could say the aftermath of the battle from this issue. But it just seems like a weird choice. The other thing of note, you get the Black Panther is back on the cover. Good to have T'Challa around again. Love T'Challa. Yeah, I think that's who's getting left off the corner cover box. We have Hank and Jan, Black Panther, Vision. Oh, and there's no Thor. Okay, so for whatever reason, Thor is not represented. All right, let's get into issue 68 and the second half of the Ultron story. So it's actually called "And We Battle for the Earth," and there's an introduction there. And then we lose Barry Windsor Smith, unfortunately, and we get Sal Buscema with inks by Sam Granger. So it's a very different art team this issue than last issue. And I was always a Sal Buscema fan. I have no problem with Sal. In fact, I think that Sal's work in the mid to late 70s is spectacularly good on things like the Defenders and the Hulk and a few other comics I read back then. But I don't love it on this issue. So you'll see as we go on. And by the way, I didn't give you the date. This is issue number 68. This one's cover dated September 1969. So the previous issue was August of 1969. So these are the first two cover dated comics to come out about the time of the moon landing. Yeah, in fact, September of 69. So they usually ran 3 months ahead. So June. These were out the summer of the moon landing and the summer of Woodstock. This is what the kids were reading in the park in the car at Woodstock, waiting for the bands to start. Isn't that cool? All right, so good old Ultron screaming his usual invective. You and unsuspecting millions shall perish. There's the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. There's the Avengers. All right, so Ultron goes to activate his weapon, and nothing happens, and he can't figure out why. All of Manhattan should be engulfed in a fiery cataclysm, a blazing fury that none but Ultron 6 could survive. The Avengers have done this somehow. Have just deprived me of the taste of victory. They shall pay. And then they attack in my very stronghold. So the Avengers come rushing in, and you get a great, this top shot here is beautiful, right? There's Clint, the Wasp, Thor with his hammer swinging, and Yellow Jacket. Although for whatever reason, they sure did like to show Yellow Jacket as a human size rather than Jan's Wasp size. I don't understand that. When Jim Shooter writes the comic years later and Perez draws it, they always had Hank and Jan together flying around zapping the enemy, although they never did a whole lot of damage that way. It was something that Shooter needed to work on, was creative ways to use them. So Ultron unleashes a blast that knocks the Avengers back, and then someone off screen announces their presence, and uh-oh. It's being tricky. Oh dear, I should have left well enough alone. Okay. Have my recent deeds so condemned me, the Vision says, that you cannot speak even the name of the Vision. And so now the Vision admits that he's, he was responsible. I was the one that unleashed Ultron 6 on the world, and only I could thwart his ghastly plans by wrecking his apparatus from within with my last ounce of strength. And then the Vision collapses. So they pick him up and fly off. Apparently the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents let him go. And the Vision, they're trying to wake him up by blasting his solar gem with energy. You will recall that in the movies, they made the little gem in the Vision's forehead an infinity gem, which, I thought that was a pretty good idea for the for the movies. But here it is still a solar power collector and blaster, and they're having to fill him up with energy there. And then the Vision is able to realize that how Ultron was able to manipulate the adamantium and create his body is he got a hold of the device called the molecular rearranger. Now, the molecular rearranger is in the proud tradition of Marvel amazing gizmos like the what's the one that destroys Galactus or can destroy Galactus? The Ultimate Nullifier. So the molecular rearranger versus the Ultimate Nullifier would be an interesting fight. two devices fighting each other. So the Avengers call up the SHIELD helicarrier. There it is. And they contact Dr. Myron McClane, who realizes the molecular rearranger has been stolen. And so the Avengers come up with a plan. They call up T'Challa, the Black Panther, and get him to come and bring some vibranium. And then they announce that Dr. McClane will be at the United Nations. And Ultron says it is a trap, of course. The Avengers are desperate fishermen, and McClane the more than willing bait. McClane, he who alone knows the formula for the alloy adamantium. How much more swiftly humanity would fall before me if only, yes, I shall enter the trap and destroy the trappers. So he's going to go to the UN. And it's interesting, he even says, with McClane as my captive, I could create an army of mindless robots, and on that day, mankind shall surely die. So Ultron wants to pull the Terminator thing years before the Terminator movies happen. And also, I think it's interesting that he wants to create an army of robots, which is something he does in the Kurt Busiek era of the Avengers. So they're at the UN. There's the Quinjet. Jan realized she didn't have anything to wear. Oh, boy. And then the Avengers come into the UN. Dr. McClane is giving his address. Ultron 6 attacks. And, yeah, I just got to say, Ultron can be one of the most fearsome-looking menaces, villains in the Marvel Universe. The way that George Perez draws him, muscular and dark gray like a battleship and just crackling with energy, is fantastic. But this Ultron is like the worst thing I've ever seen. This is terrible. I mean, this is not good. So he attacks McClane, and there's a shootout. Ultron's destroying people. And the Avengers attack. It's a great Thor yelling, Avengers assemble, throws the hammer. It bounces off. And Ultron is challenging them, and Clint grows to massive size in the UN building and then smashes his fist down. Thinks he's driven Ultron through the ground, but Ultron pops up and blasts him. Thor gets Ultron a good shot there. I say thee nay. And man, it would be so much better if Ultron looked good and didn't have those scrawny arms and legs. How terrible. Ultron blasts Thor in the face, something that happens in 162. He kidnaps McClane, who's still trying to wake up. And then Ultron is going to drain his mind. Within moments, the human's innermost secrets shall be mine. And McClane says, no. And then he said, no, too much. And he fights back. And Ultron suddenly says, wait, something is wrong. My mind filling with thoughts I cannot bear. No, I was prepared to receive any scientific formula, any arcane knowledge, but not this. His face, look at Ultron's face. It's convulsed. He's tearing himself apart. We've won. So Ultron throws McClane away. He's caught by Goliath before he can hit the wall. Ultron seems like he's dying now, but he says, there's within me the power to turn a city into flaming ruins. I shall not die alone. at which point Jan throws a special prism to Thor, which we're going to find out is actually vibranium that the Black Panther has brought. For some reason, it's in prism form. And then at the slightest touch at a crucial point, the prism expands into that which shall shield a metropolis. He puts this bowl down over Ultron as Ultron's about to explode, Kirby dots flooding outside of him and all. And whatever befall, the son of Odin shall stand firm above it or die. Boom. And you can see it was a big enough explosion. It actually seems to have shattered the edges of that vibranium bowl. And Clint says, you did it, Curly. You destroyed Ultron. He destroyed himself, Avenger. I but contained the blast with yon Panther sent vibranium shield. And then they pull the mask off of Myron McClane, and it's actually Hank. And the interesting thing, too, is it's not just Hank in disguise. They actually hypnotized Hank into believing he was Dr. McClane and made him memorize the speech. And he filled his subconscious with one thought, one phrase, something so alien to Ultron's nature that it might drive his non-human mind insane. And it worked, Big Brain. What was that phrase anyhow? And Hank says a simple phrase, an ancient one that men have lived by since the dawn of time: thou shalt not kill. So Ultron blew himself up, which is interesting because he's adamantium. It must mean that the molecular rearranger was incorporated into his body, and when he exploded, it caused the molecular rearranger to just basically disintegrate him. And I think that that's accurate. I think that this is the last of that particular Ultron. I'm not sure when we see Ultron again. I want to say that we see Ultron again in the 120s when there's that Inhumans battle. Ultron shows up in disguise against the Inhumans. That seems right. And then we don't see him again until the great 160, 161, 162, 170, 171. I think that's right. So we will see him again, but usually they waited about five years, about 60 issues between Ultron appearances, which seems smart, right? Seems fair. All right, so Ultron has tried to destroy the world and has tried to create a robot army, stuff that he likes to do, and he has been tricked into destroying himself, more or less. We do get an ad for Captain Marvel here. If only that that series had done well enough to continue. I love it. Got most issues. And then the only other thing of note is the at the end of the letters page, we get a next Kang the Conqueror. So I am very much looking forward to seeing, because off the top of my head, I don't remember which Kang story this is, unless it's the I don't think we're to the Squadron Sinister Kang yet. I don't think, but maybe we are. So I like that. I like when I don't remember, because it gives me a little surprise. So, all right, that was Avengers 67 and 68. A very fun, kind of thin Ultron two-parter. I'd love to know what you think about it. I mean, it mainly consisted of finding out that Ultron could become adamantium, which is going to be important for him going forward. That's always his ace in the hole, is that he's really powerful, he's really deadly, but he also is indestructible, or almost. Later, it'll be Wanda that becomes the big bugaboo for him, because she can cause him to self-destruct and cause him to have malfunctions with her power. But we got to see an adamantium Ultron. We got to see an Ultron that was half flying machine like Korvac. And I got to be honest, I don't love the Ultron that's the Korvac body. And that's probably just because, A, that's not how I first encountered him, so it seems wrong to me. And B, that's kind of Korvac shtick. I don't need two characters that are designed that way. But that being said, I like it better than the scrawny arms and legs Ultron that we got in this issue. That was just bad. Somebody needed to sit down with Sal Buscema and say, no. No. You just draw him normal arms and draw him big, muscular, but otherwise normal arms and legs that are made out of adamantium, dark gray. That's all you need to do. Don't need any fake, weird looking bones, arms, whatever. No, just do it normally. And that's when he'll look his best. Also, this is before he developed the encephalo ray, where he could zap you and basically kill you or put you in a coma with one shot, which he's going to do to people in 161, I believe, and they find the bodies and all in 162 until they figure out no spoilers there, from a comic from 1977. Anyway, there's not a lot of analysis to do here. It's interesting to me how, as simple as Stan Lee's stories seemed to be at the time, there were usually layers you could discuss, right? There were characterizations and conversations and way people behaved and things that you could go into and dig into and discuss. Honestly, with this two-parter, I mean, what is there to discuss? Are we happy that Clint is Goliath still? I mean, we've been thinking about that now for 6 issues. We've got Black Panther back, cool. Ultron's adamantium, cool. Where's Cap? I don't know. What am I missing here? I'd love to spend 5 or 10 more minutes on this episode discussing these issues, but honestly, I just don't feel like there's a lot going on here that's very deep. This is just kind of a battle, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially with the Avengers and Ultron. A battle's fine. So I think a lot of the nuance of Ultron we're not going to get until Jim Shooter. The whole idea of killing, the Oedipus thing, killing his father, marrying his mother, that all comes later. He's just still an evil robot wanting to destroy the world, and that's all he is. So, all right, well, that'll do it then. I don't know what else to say. Join me on our next episode, and we're going to find out together what Kang the Conqueror is up to these days, because if Ultron's not the greatest Avengers villain, then it's Kang probably. And between the two of them, that's to be a nice little run. So join me next time on All the Avengers. And again, if you would please go to patreon.com and just search for All of the Avengers. I think you can it's also linked from avengersassemble.net, www.avengersassemble.net. Become a patron, join up, leave comments, leave questions, and we'll get to them on the air starting next issue maybe. So, all right, we're going to get out of here for another episode. We will see you guys in the next Avengers issue. Avengers Assemble, everybody. See you.